Before this video begins, I would like to give a quick thank you to my Asbantium level patrons Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Out of all the wild and wonderful settings in the illustrious history of Doctor Who, there's a handful of planets fans find themselves particularly drawn to. I'm talking about places like Gallifrey and Skaro, significant anchors in the universe which fans have come to love over the years. But there's another planet more close to home and also further from home that's just as interesting, if not even more interesting with its history and impact on the show as a whole. I'm talking about Mondas, one of the many homeworlds of the Cybermen, who incidentally are one of my favourite Doctor Who villains. But what makes Mondas so special? Why is it such an interesting planet in the Doctor Who universe? Well, that's what I'm here to tell you in today's Doctor Who lore video. So grab your winter coat and polish up your metal bucket hat, because it's time to take a deep dive into Earth's twin planet, Mondas.
Straight from Mount Palomar Observatory is the first picture of our new neighbor in space.
All throughout human history, we have been obsessed with the stars, the beautiful lights in the night sky that seem to move in the darkness. It's easy to dismiss our distant ancestors for their flawed ideas of Earth being the centre of the entire universe, with everything else orbiting our pale blue dot, but I'll never fail to be impressed at how well they were able to perceive our solar system. All the way back in the 2nd millennium BC, like a long time ago, Babylonian astronomers had managed to identify Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn as planets in Earth's solar system. Like, this is over 1,000 years before Jesus was supposedly born, to put that into perspective for you. However, as science developed further and technology allowed us to see more, a lot of astronomers began to feel convinced that there had to be more in our neighbourhood. And sure, we found Uranus, Neptune and dwarf planets like Pluto, but people still thought there had to be even more. American astronomer Percival Lowell was one such man, desperate to find a so-called Planet X. You see, there are some discrepancies in the orbit of Uranus, giving it a more irregular orbit than the other planets in the solar system. This ultimately led to the discovery of Neptune, whose size and gravity accounts for some of those irregularities. But Lowell believed there had to be another hidden planet out there affecting the orbit. Most astronomers in this day and age would tend to immediately laugh off the idea of a Planet X or the more specific Planet 9. But in the world of science fiction, the concept has become an absolute goldmine of ideas and is the cornerstone of many stories. Of course, back in 1966, Pluto was considered the 9th planet. So when Kit Pedler and Jerry Davis were crafting their Doctor Who story, Mondas was the 10th planet of the solar system, hence the title, The 10th Planet. Yeah, it pretty much does what it says on the tin.
Now, doesn't that remind you of anything,
Mondas is what is often called a counter-Earth, which is a term for a hypothetical planet orbiting on the opposite side of the solar system to Earth itself. A theory dating back as far as 4th century BC. In this case, Mondas once occupied the same orbit as Earth, visually appearing as an upside-down Earth of sorts, with the exact same continents, just Australianized. It also followed a similar evolutionary path to our home, with lizard kings reigning supreme during prehistory, much like the Silurians of Earth's past. The lizard kings were advanced and capable of augmenting ape-like creatures and making them servants, along with cybernetically augmenting saurian dinosaurs. Yeah, you know, that's some like blood dragon stuff going on there. Not much is known about the culture or society of the lizard kings, but it's safe to say they had a very similar path to the Silurians and were ruled by a queen, despite the obvious contradictory name. However, interestingly, the Lizard Kings genetically engineered a tool named Roulier to shape the land of Mondas, although it quickly grew out of control and the Lizard Kings had to imprison it to prevent it from consuming the entire planet. You know, I guess it just got kind of hungry. At the same time of the Lizard Kings, the Mondasian Sea Devils were also very prominent on the planet, with both races worshipping the god Golgoth, which is actually, you know, like a real thing on their planet. It exists. And yeah, it's about as brutal and destructive as you could imagine. According to the book The Quantum Archangel, the ancient godlike race, the Constructors of Destiny, created Mondas and then manipulated the moon into interfering with its orbit. Not sure why, I guess it was just a prank. Due to Mondas' proximity to Earth, this approaching rogue planet scared both the Silurians and the Lizard Kings, with both independent races fleeing into hibernation, with the Lizard Kings hibernating in the Dark Continent. I'm not sure which continent it is, but I can only guess that it is indeed Australia. Sorry Australians, I didn't mean to target you twice in one video. But anyway, the arrival of the moon disrupted Mondas' orbit and threw the planet out into space, and its journey away from the sun began freezing the planet, causing no clouds to be in the sky. While the Lizard Kings and Mondasian Sea Devils were hibernating, their augmented apes began to evolve alongside the untouched apes of the planet. The Mondasian humans were basically identical to us on Earth, although the augmented apes developed a lot quicker, using their machinery to convert the primitive human Mondasians into Cybermen and take control of the dinosaurs. During this period, the planet was ruled by the mysterious dictator Halvlad, who was a ruthless yet brilliant cybernetic engineer similar to Davros, developing cyborg soldiers to wage war with the distant planet Farah and paving the way for the Cybermen as species, although his creations would turn on him and convert Halvlad himself due to his lust for power, which they didn't exactly vibe with because emotions and that. With all of this rapidly advancing technology, the early Cybermen created airships and built cities, along with establishing their dominance over the planet by fighting with the remaining Lizard Kings as they were hibernating. Although the awakening of Golgoth wiped out the Cybermen and ended the first Mondasian Cyberman civilization, marking an end of an era for Mondas as it began its long and lonely journey into the darkness. Around 2,000 years after the destruction of the early Mondasian Cybermen, the Mondasian humans had developed a society like 20th century Earth, although the majority of the Mondasians were forced to live underground due to the surface of the planet being too hot and inhospitable as it hurtled towards the sun. Unless you were the cult of Siva, they seemed to just be fine to chill out in the cyber control ruins, I guess. It was around this time that Mondasian archaeologists Corving and Joy sought answers for surviving Mondas's orbit decaying yet again, only for the planet to break free of its orbit, killing Joy and leaving a dying Corvin to unknowingly crawl into an old cyber conversion unit and become the first new Cyberman on Mondas in 2,000 years. Despite the deteriorating conditions of the planet, the human Mondasians developed rapidly and established a united global community ruled by a technocracy, a science-led form of government where the decision makers are chosen based on their actual expertise and background. However, despite this advancement, cyber conversion began to be used to ensure the survival of the population, especially being used to convert workers to survive on the surface and work on a huge ambitious propulsion system with the goal of returning to the solar system. By this point, the planet was ruled by the Central Advisory Committee of Mondas, a hive mind of 20 individuals governing the planet's society. This was achieved by plugging 20 of Mondas's greatest thinkers into a computer, laying the groundwork for what would eventually become the Cyber Planners. This central committee was convinced that the conversion was the only way to survive, converting their police into Cybermen who ride cyber-augmented horses. However, despite the successful conversions removing emotions, the modern cyber Mondans would reject the augments and die, so the plan for a fully cyber-converted population seemed impossible. Sometime later, in the domed cities of Mondas, the 5th Doctor and Nyssa arrived during their travels in the TARDIS, meeting the Mondasians who had developed a society much like 1950s Britain and had adopted a number of distinct titles for their professions. You had Doctor Man, who was a scientist, Sister Man, who was a nun, Electro Man, an electrician, and Crew Man, which was just like a umbrella title. These Mondasians even celebrated Christmas, using their decorations as symbolic representations of the planet's journey through space. The tinsel was the journey itself, the baubles represented the planets, and the star at the top of the tree was meant to symbolise the solar system they longed to return to. However, the Doctor's arrival created a much darker situation than he could have ever intended. When he was scanned, it was discovered that Time Lords actually have an extra brain lobe, which was then recreated for the Cybermen and fixed the issues the Cyber Mondans were experiencing. The newly established Cyber Planner then decided to convert every Mondasian, although the Doctor was able to stop the plan by destroying the committee's central command unit and left under the belief that the already converted Cybermen could live in peace alongside the humans and become good under the guidance of Dr. Man Allen, who could make Cybermen more human.
Feelings? I do not understand that word.
However, the Doctor's actions to save the people of Mondas were in vain, because Dr. Man Allen worked with Commander Zeng to force the population into cyber conversion anyway, conquering the planet and ushering in a new era of Cyberman domination. This dominance would begin to spread into space, with cyber leaders like Cybernaut Zogron commanding a mighty cyber fleet as a pioneer of the Cyber Empire. At some point thousands of years before the 20th century, two distinct groups of Cybermen emerged, the Mondans and the Cyber Faction. The Mondans wanted to keep a sense of connection to their biological form, retaining elements of their original body like their fleshy hands. However, the Cyber Faction was more intent on fully embracing cybernetics and would ultimately leave Mondas, solidifying their own empire and staging distinct invasions of Earth and its outposts. Meanwhile, the Mondans had finally finished developing the planet-moving engine and set their sights on Earth, hoping to return to the solar system and steal Earth's energy. They sent out scout crafts to work out where Earth actually was, although these attempts attempts were unsuccessful, with Cybermen like Graham and Creel crashing on Earth without being able to report the location back to Mondas, which was around 200 light years away. There were a few invasion attempts here and there, but the most significant one came in December 1986, when the history of Mondas would change forever. Towards the end of the 20th century, Mondas was finally drawing closer to Earth, dragging the manned Zeus 4 probe into its gravity and causing the ship to explode. Meanwhile, an advanced party of Cybermen led by Cyber Leader Krell arrived at Snowcap Base in Antarctica, along with other Cybermen invading Space Command HQ in Geneva. This was because Mondas' energy reserves were depleted, and absorbing Earth's energy was the only way to keep the planet alive, with the Cybermen planning on taking all Earth humans to Mondas and converting them. However, the Mondasians were too ambitious and greedy, with their home planet absorbing too much energy and being destroyed, killing all the Cybermen on Earth who depended on Mondas for their own individual power. Some Cybermen were able to survive the destruction, moving to the jungle planet Lonzis and developing into a form much like the Cyber faction, but with the 1986 destruction of Mondas, the native Mondasian Cybermen and all other life on the planet were rendered extinct for good. Earth would cover things up by claiming Mondas was actually just an asteroid, although the human race would exploit the leftover cyber ships and use the technology to make their own advances into the stars. And, of course, the overall legacy of the Cybermen would continue, with parallel evolution on planets like Telos, Planet 14, and the stranded colony ship en route to Mondas itself. Along with that, the Mondasian Cybermen at some point seemingly eventually unified and combined with the parallel universe Cybermen to form the Cyberiad and continue to dominate the universe. Mondas was a very short-lived planet in Doctor Who media, being introduced and destroyed within the same story. But it's a prime example of how expanded media can, well, expand settings and world building, even if things do end up contradicting each other a lot, like I really had to untangle a lot of stuff for this. Thanks to these extended universe stories, we can learn all sorts about the history of Mondas and the long and arduous journey it took throughout the stars. It saw the rise and fall of civilizations and the evolution of humans into emotionless cyborg monsters. There's a whole detailed history within this setting, and it still feels like we've barely scratched the surface of Mondas. And I mean, if you do scratch the surface, you'll probably find some humans underneath. It's a prime example of how well any planet can be fleshed out and developed. Stories like Spare Parts really show you how distinct and deep this setting can be, somewhere with so many individual aspects and moving parts, reminding you that yes, this is its own living and breathing world. I'd love to see more stories exploring the long history of Mondas, either when it was still in the same orbit as Earth, or when it was far off in the darkness of space, succumbing to the cold vacuum without an atmosphere. There's so much potential there, all throughout the history. Even playing with the similarities to Earth's own history like the Lizard Kings and the Mondasian Sea Devils. Obviously Mondas will always be defined by the Cybermen, but there are long stretches of history without any Cybermen at all on the planet, and that would be a great period of time to explore, showcasing new layers of one of Doctor Who's first most iconic planets. So I hope you enjoyed this lore video and learned plenty of random stuff, even if I had to leave some out for continuity convenience, like, you know, because everything contradicts, I had to almost headcanon a couple of things. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. And a special thank you to my Bantam level patrons, Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson, my Platinum level patrons, Maximilian Foreman and Nick Skames, and all my Gold level patrons, Boots, Calvin, Daniel Shillito, Franz Horn aka Line Vortex, Herna Verzog, Robert Hock, and Tom Azar. Thank you so much for your support.